We are anonymous. No faces, no flags, no permission slips. And before anyone starts screaming conspiracy, remember this. When governments are proud of the truth, they preserve records. When they're terrified of the truth, they delete, redact, vanish, and intimidate. Here's what's been going down in the last 24 to 48 hours, and why Donald Trump and his machine look like they're in full-blown containment mode. First, the deletion. Multiple outlets have documented that files on the Justice Department's public Epstein page have disappeared after being posted, without a clear public explanation at the time, including items involving Trump. And now the most explosive piece, an 86 pages prosecution memo dated December 19th, 2019, about the investigation into potential co-conspirators of Jeffrey Epstein. Major reporting confirms that such a memo exists and was part of the recently released materials. According to the reporting and the document descriptions discussed publicly, this memo was essentially the Justice Department's internal roadmap after Epstein was indicted on July 2nd, 2019. A detailed rundown of investigative steps and an analysis of whether Epstein's associates and employees may or may not be criminally liable. The memo is stamped with the kind of language that's always used to hide uncomfortable truths, privileged attorney work product, deliberative process, and references to grand jury secrecy. But here's the part that should make your blood run cold. It allegedly contained a list of possible co-conspirators and victim allegations tied to those possible co-conspirators, and then it disappeared from public access after scrutiny intensified, according to the Midas Touch Network's reporting about the document being removed and preserved elsewhere. If you're asking, why would they yank a memo like that? Look around at the broader fight over Epstein transparency. Even mainstream coverage has emphasized that the release has been heavily redacted, criticized as incomplete, and politically explosive, with lawmakers pointing to missing or obscured material. And yes, the government has claimed redactions are about privacy and legal constraints, while critics argue the blackouts go far beyond protecting victims. That tension between we're protecting victims and we're protecting powerful people is the whole battlefield. Now let's talk about the intimidation tactics happening at the same time, because the pattern is always the same. Erase the evidence, silence the dissent, smear the watchdogs. On February 6th in Oldham County, Kentucky, at the Oldham County Republican Party's Lincoln Day dinner, Republican Congressman Thomas Massie was speaking when Kentucky House Speaker David Osborne literally snatched the microphone out of Massie's hands mid-speech. That's not rumor. It's been reported, and video circulated widely. And in that clip you can hear a line that sums up the MAGA era perfectly. Someone shouts, "Welcome to the snake pit, baby." That's not unity. That's a party eating its own because someone dared to talk about what they're not supposed to talk about. Why would Massie be targeted? Because Massie has been publicly tied to the push for Epstein file transparency, including procedural moves in Congress connected to forcing action, and he's been vocal about objections to redactions and withholding. In other words, he's not staying obedient, and obedience is the only principle Trumpism has left. So picture the scene. A sitting member of Congress, in a room full of his own party's people, gets physically cut off while speaking. That's not democracy. That's control. That's what happens when the subject matter is radioactive, and Donald Trump's orbit doesn't want the conversation to happen, especially not in front of Republican voters. Now, while microphones are getting ripped away and documents are getting deleted, we're also learning more about the redaction machine. Major reporting has described frantic, large-scale redaction efforts around the Epstein materials, and the public debate is still raging over what is being hidden and why. The core accusation from critics is simple. The government is using redaction like a chainsaw, and the results look less like privacy protection and more like power protection. And here's the thing. If the system truly wanted transparency, it wouldn't be playing whack-a-mole with its own public document library. Yet we've already seen documented cases of Epstein-related files being posted and then disappearing. That's the opposite of confidence. That's panic. But the cover-up energy doesn't stop at Epstein, because in the same 24 to 48-hour window described in the original story you gave me, there's another scandal that reeks of federal interference: the killing of Renée Good in Minneapolis, and the reported pressure campaign to steer investigations away from civil rights accountability and toward blaming her widow. Multiple credible outlets have reported a wave of resignations among federal prosecutors in Minnesota tied to Justice Department pressure around the Renée Good case. and legal analysis and reporting have pointed to serious questions about whether a full, credible investigation was allowed to proceed. FBI agents with a signed warrant were prepared to document blood spatter and bullet holes in Renée Good's SUV, then were ordered to stop from the top because the results could contradict Trump's public claim that Good violently, willfully, and maliciously ran over an ICE officer. I can't personally verify every word of that specific description from the sources I pulled today, but the bigger structure, political pressure, a refusal to pursue the customary civil rights inquiry, resignations by prosecutors, and public controversy over the government's handling of the case is supported by substantial reporting and analysis. And when prosecutors start walking out, when an office bleeds experienced attorneys because leadership is forcing a predetermined outcome, that's a siren. That's not normal. That's the justice system being bent into a propaganda tool. Now bring it back to Epstein, because Epstein is where Trump world is most exposed, not just morally but politically. Only a partial release has been made public, with millions of pages still unproduced, potentially 3 million documents, and far more pages, and that the missing category includes the internal memos, deliberative communications, and victim interviews you'd expect in a serious archive. The public record does confirm the rollout has involved millions of documents, intense controversy, and ongoing fights over what remains withheld or obscured. It also matches the public reporting that the 86-page prosecution memo was part of the disclosed universe, and that it dealt with potential co-conspirators after Epstein's death, meaning the government had a post-arrest, post-death lane to pursue other people and at minimum discussed it internally. That fact alone destroys the lazy talking point that it was only Epstein. If the memo exists, then the government itself was analyzing other possible criminal liability. And then it gets darker. The memo reportedly includes broad redactions pages where the names of co-conspirators are blacked out. That mirrors the broader criticism that redactions in the new Epstein releases have been sweeping, confusing, and sometimes seemingly disconnected from protecting victims. So here's the logic any honest adult can follow. If this is truly about protecting survivors, then redact identifying details of victims and minors. Fine. But why redact officials' names? Why redact analytical sections about charging decisions? Why make huge portions unreadable? And why in documented cases did files vanish after being posted? That's the question Trump's DOJ doesn't want asked. Now let's address the Ghislaine Maxwell piece. The story describes Maxwell being set for a congressional deposition, allegedly after interacting with top DOJ leadership and then planning to invoke the Fifth. Public reporting does confirm that Maxwell has been involved in ongoing political and legal maneuvering, and that congressional interest in her testimony has intensified amid renewed pressure around Epstein materials. Whether she answers or pleads the Fifth, the political reality is obvious. The public wants names, networks, and accountability, and the people who benefited from silence want the opposite. And then there are the kinds of Epstein emails and messages that make you feel like you need to scrub your brain afterward, like the original text's reference to a message saying, "Is she too old for you? I will hunt my other Czech friends," and the reference to an image that appeared to be of a child. I'm not going to repeat or embellish anything graphic here. What I will say is that mainstream reporting has been explicit that Epstein-related files contain a horrifying volume of sexual exploitation material, and that handling redaction and release requires strict care to protect victims and prevent further harm. That's exactly why the public deserves competent, transparent governance, not chaotic drops, sloppy privacy failures, and disappearing files. And while we're talking about standards of behavior, your original story brings up that 2017 email hoax targeting Mark Carney, then governor of the Bank of England, where the prankster tried to bait him into sleazy talk about dashing bar ladies and crystal glasses, and Carney shut it down with a crisp response. Not appropriate at all. That email exchange is well documented in mainstream outlets. The point is simple. When someone tries to drag you into grossness, there are two types of people, those who shut it down and those who swim in it. Now let's say the quiet part out loud about Trump. Donald Trump has spent years orbiting scandals like a planet made of grease. Every time something ugly surfaces, the response is the same. Deny, attack, distract, and bully. And now the administration connected to him is dealing with the single most toxic archive imaginable, Epstein, and the public is watching documents appear, disappear, and reappear through outside preservation efforts. Think about what that means, and that's why Trump looks like he's panicking. Because if this were harmless, nobody would be grabbing microphones from members of their own party in Kentucky. Nobody would be presiding over a document library where files disappear after posting. Nobody would need to hide behind oceans of redactions while insisting everything is totally fine. Here's what I want you to do next, because this part matters. Don't let this become another doom scroll story that fades by next week. Save what you can. Read the reporting from multiple outlets. Compare what the government posts today to what's still there tomorrow. And when you see the pattern deletes, redactions, intimidation, call it what it is, a system protecting itself. Trump doesn't fear witch hunts. He fears receipts. If you've listened this far, and you're thinking, this will blow over, that's exactly what they're counting on. Your silence is their shield. Your apathy is their eraser. So here's us final call. Spread this story. Ask questions everywhere. Comment sections, social media, town halls, and directly to the people who claim to represent you. Force them to answer. Force them to open the files. Force transparency. We are anonymous. We do not forget. We do not forgive. And we do not disappear.